Good morning, America.
But it's not morning, it's night.
It's always morning somewhere.
It is America, though.
It's
And it
also
is America.
always 5
It's
o'clock
not
somewhere.
America if they're watching it somewhere else.
Oh, true.
If my friends from India are watching it, that's not America.
But it's America
Then
here
it would
in
be
morning
morning.
somewhere, so it's good morning, America.
Actually, it may be morning by now. No, not yet. 30
Okay.
more minutes. Okay. It'll be morning in 30 minutes.
If this goes on
let's-
for long enough, then I can say that.
So this is kind of something new, and we have our guest, Dr. Spencer, here with us again, and this is Abigail, and so and of course you remember Xander from our prayer videos. Abigail is going to join us, and it may just be me and her for some of them. Xander may not be here for some of them. We're actually going to be looking at kind of some apologetics type stuff with evidence that there is a God. And then we're also going to kind of look at the different religions of the world and try to narrow down, which one kind of makes the most sense given the evidence that we have about the way the world is. So we're going to start just kind of introducing the idea tonight with a general discussion of what we would classify as the 4 basic groups of arguments for the existence of God. And they are. Dun dun dun.
They are.
Abigail, you got to guess at what one of them is?
They exist.
Cosmetology.
Cosmetology. Yes, so the way that we put on our makeup determines whether God exists or not. No,
Hope you do your mascara well.
Yeah. For those of us who don't wear makeup, does that make us atheists?
I'm an atheist.
Oh, we don't wear makeup. We're atheists.
Cosmetology, a religion where your God depends on what makeup you're wearing.
That's a whole other class.
Yeah. So the actual pronunciation of that is not cosmetology. It's cosmology. There's not a ta in there. Just but cosmology. So yes, that is certainly one of them. And this argument and the groups of arguments that fall in this category basically try to prove the existence of God based on the fact that everything has to have a cause. Everything is caused by something. And so ultimately back somewhere there had to be an initial cause, a first cause that caused everything else, right? And so the idea being obviously that God was that first cause. Now, one of the, I guess, problems with that actually proving, it might prove the existence of an all-powerful being or even an all-powerful mindless thing that caused something. I mean, gravity causes a lot of things.
Yep.
So it doesn't necessarily prove the existence of a loving personal God like Christians believe in. But it does kind of point in the direction of if we're here, which we seem to be, as far as we know, and he didn't feel that. He's
Nope.
not actually here.
I don't exist.
But if we do exist, then something caused us to be here. And if we take that back down the line far enough, eventually we get back to that first cause. And then the argument is that is God. And this is a common argument that's made. It's not, I don't think, necessarily the most powerful one, especially for a good, loving God who cares about us. But it does perhaps give some indication of there being something or someone that started it all, as opposed to the idea of it just coming from nothing.
It really depends on who you're trying to convince, who you're talking to.
Yeah, and and I guess that's probably the reason for the multitude of arguments, because different arguments hit different people closer to home.
The cosmological argument reverts back to, I believe it's Aristotle's philosophy of just, I think he called it the unmoved mover. That was basically his concept of a greater being, was just someone who just put everything into motion. And like Dad's talking about, there is no characteristic there. There is no, this is what you can expect out of a god. It's just
there has to be something there.
exactly.
I mean, all the causes had to start somewhere.
Right.
There had to be a first one, and for the atheist, a lot of times that first one was for a long time the Big Bang, although now they're kind of debunking that and actually are kind of moving toward the idea of an eternal universe among some circles, which runs into other problems that we'll talk about another time. But you know, some would say the Big Bang. Of course, then you got, you know, this little, well, where did the thing that exploded come from, and what caused the explosion? So it's still, you've got to have a cause. You've got to have something cause that. And so any philosophy that you use, whether it's atheist, Christian, you know, pastafarians, as Spencer mentioned before we started recording, whatever it is, you've got to go back to some supernatural event.
Yeah.
Because nature does not explain how it all started.
What is their big supernatural event?
They believe that
the
flying-
spaghetti monster,
yeah,
the flying spaghetti monster,
made it all. Yeah.
is I mean, he like, I don't know, vomited us out or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, there's
That's what I was.
well,
Hey,
we're not going to dig deep into the Pastafarians. Rastafarians we may look at. But.
A cosmological argument is incredibly easy to make and pretty easy to support as well, because you can point at almost anything
Right.
that has been made. For example, we're in a house right now.
Or anything that happens in
If
the event.
yes, if you just say, okay, this house just appeared out of nowhere, it just came into
Just
existence.
grew out of the woods.
Nobody created it. Nobody
Caused
cut
it to be
these
here.
boards. Nobody hammered them all together or anything. It just happened. Chances are, the people you tell that to are going to look at you like you've grown an extra head.
And it's also that brings us to the second one, because they're kind of closely related, which is, anybody want to take a guess at that second one that's closely related to the cosmological argument?
Teleological.
The teleological, and this has nothing to do with watching something on the tele, but
It's all about the phone.
it's all about the phone,
Yes.
Telephone.
telephone. Yeah, so phone it in. But
And whether or not you use the tele, it must be stated that this is a logical argument.
it is
Teleological.
It's a teleological, telephone or television, either way. But this basically is pointing at the evidence that there is order in the universe, that there is design, and that that design is an intelligent design in nature, not just an accidental design. So, you know, if we dropped a jar of beads and it shattered on the floor, there would be a design of that, but it wouldn't be an intelligent design. Whereas if we took the beads and put them and spelled out words with them, that would be an intelligent design. And so the idea of the teleological idea is that design demands a designer. Intelligent design, and there's a big debate in schools and things right now too about whether this argument can be used to explain the origins of the universe, or whether it's too close to creationism and
Right.
has to be thrown out to support Darwinism and atheism and evolution.
And the big thing between them is, well, the teleological is design demands a designer, and the cosmological is just
An effect
cause
needs a cause.
needs
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
And the difference is, like, if you found a house in the woods or something, then the cosmological would be, this is here because something happened. Whether
Yeah.
that something was
What happened?
it
Yeah.
fell from space or dynamite
Right.
exploded or something, it doesn't
Well,
matter.
you know, you think about an explosion, for example. If there's an explosion, that could have just been a natural buildup of some explosive gas that caused an explosion. That happens. You know, a forest fire. It could have just been, you know, the sun shining so hotly in a certain spot and it got amplified, and caused a fire to start. Or the explosion and the fire could have been started by a man. A man could have actually placed dynamite and lit the fuse and caused the explosion. He could have actually left his campfire unattended and it spread and started the fire. So, but there's the difference still there, that cause happens versus a design thing where the explosion, dynamite was used to carve tunnels through mountains and mines, and they used explosives which are destructive, but they learned how to use their intelligence to design the explosives to explode in certain ways in certain places to bring about a certain. Mount Rushmore
Right, that's what I was thinking.
was
Yeah.
created by design through the use of a lot of explosives,
Mm-hmm.
and yet now it's 4 faces
Yep.
until they decide that it's horrible and they tear it down. But
So as we move along with some of these arguments, you're going to see how we get closer and closer to not just is there a God, but if there is a God, who is God?
Right.
what kind of being is this God?
Mm-hmm. With the ontological.
We haven't talked about all
Sorry,
that.
yeah. That was stuck in my head from earlier. With the cosmological argument, we have just there is a being that started all of this.
or an event, or
A
a
being-
thing, something
Something, someone happened,
somehow started stuff.
started all of this. But then as we move on to the teleological, we see whatever it is was done with intelligence and precision. When you look at a tree, you're not just looking at a tree. You're seeing all of the tiny little molecules and atoms that combine perfectly to make that tree what it is. And not only that, but on the other scale of things, you're seeing the entire forest, a gigantic ecosystem that works together with other forests around the planet, with microscopic plants and animals in the waters to provide us with oxygen that we use, that we breathe out back into the plants. And all of it works together in an amazing system that cannot have been brought into existence without an amazing amount of sheer intelligence.
Yeah, and the design there, and a will, and
Yes.
a purpose.
Yes.
And the design aspect indicates not just intelligence but creativity.
Yes.
And when we look at the variety of,
Mhm.
of creatures and things, so this one definitely, but that there's design demands a designer,
Mhm.
and this is similar. Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews even references this. Every house is built by some man
Mm-hmm.
or someone, but he who built all things is God.
Yes.
And so when we look at houses and we realize somebody designed that to be the way it is, some are poorly designed, some are magnificently designed, but then when we look at the world that we live in and the solar system and the galaxy and the universe, we see an even greater design that is very precise.
If we were
and-
just a
and very
little bit
ordered.
closer to the sun, then everything would burn up.
Yeah.
And if the moon were just a little bit closer to us, then the whole world would flood.
The waves, the waves would flood over us from the oceans, and then the precision of a year, so that I
Right.
mean, they can mathematically calculate when a solar eclipse is going to happen 1,000 years from now, but down to the minute, based on the precision of the movement of the solar system. There's not a watch made by man.
Mm-hmm.
A clock of any kind, even an atomic clock, is not as accurate to be able to pinpoint that like that. So,
And on the
that's
other
amazing.
side of things, with if the Earth was too close to the sun, if the Earth was any farther away from the sun, then we'd all wind up freezing to death.
Yet
And
they're
if-
all yet the whole year they're constantly moving closer and further apart.
right,
Mhm.
just a little bit to keep that, and then I've heard talk about the oxygen. The oxygen levels, if it was lower, we wouldn't be able to breathe. If it was higher, somebody started a fire, it'd burn up the whole atmosphere
Mhm.
because oxygen burns. There's so many things like that where it's just the preciseness to get to the point where we are is phenomenal. And that's only two. We'll have to cover the other two because we're using up all our time. But that's fine. And we're gonna cover the other two categories of argument next time in our next video, and then we'll start to look at some of the world religions. But just as a teaser for that, how many different religions do you suppose there are that have more than 1 million members? 1 million members. Now this is broad categories of religion. This is,
What do you consider members?
well, adherents. People who claim it as their religion.
I don't know. I'd say a lot.
I'm gonna go with. Let's go with around number 50.
I'm gonna go with 7.
I was gonna guess 50.
Well,
So I'll guess
it's-
60.
It's less than that and more than that. It's actually on this now. I don't know how exact this list is. Obviously,
Yeah, it's hard to
I don't
tell.
think they polled everybody in the world,
Right.
Yeah.
but I've got 19 on this
19.
list. Now, how many do you suppose there are that have more than 1 billion adherents or members?
3 or 2. Well, are you counting Christianity?
Yeah, the whole of Christianity as a whole, all
I'd
of the
say
different denominational
1 or 2,
flavors.
unless you're counting atheism as a religion.
Well, we are going to count that as a belief system.
Then I'll say
It's-
2 or 3.
5.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe 1.
Maybe one. It's actually 4. There are actually 4.
Wow.
So Christianity
Christianity.
is the largest by
Right.
adherents, 2.3 billion. Islam is 1.9 billion,
Right, that
so it's
was-
almost as big and growing too. It's growing as
Mhm.
well. Hinduism is
Hinduism.
1.2 billion, and then the secular
Right.
agnostic atheist
So I wasn't
group
counting
is
Hinduism.
1.1.
Yeah,
I think
Hinduism makes sense with all
Yeah,
the
I mean,
people in
yeah,
India.
yeah. You've got India and
Right.
you've got other, not just India, but in some of the areas
Yes.
around as well. So that pushes that over 1 billion.
And that's incredibly impressive because if you think about how many people are on Earth, last number I heard was 7 billion?
Somewhere over 7,
Somewhere
less than
over
8.
7
yeah.
billion. So basically, each one of those has over what
A fourth.
a fourth of the
or
population.
well, maybe not a fourth. I mean, a fifth or sixth. Well, I mean, Christianity is 2.3, 2 out of 7.
Yeah.
So that's more than a fourth.
It's a lot.
That's more than a fourth
Mhm.
of the. That's
But
like a.
there's also a lot of
There's a lot of division within that
Right.
group. That's a
Yes.
very broad category. That's everyone who claims to follow Jesus in any way, which is a huge
Yeah.
disparity
That's
from one
an
end to that to
incredibly
the other.
broad spectrum.
Yeah, but I mean, you have some of the same thing in Islam. I mean, you have the
Yeah.
Sunni and the Shiite, and we'll talk about. We'll look at some of that as well.
Mhm.
The next biggest one after that 1.1 billion of the atheist and agnostic, which is also a growing one. That one's growing
It is.
quite a lot right now. The next biggest one is only half that. It's 500 million.
Wow.
What is that?
Well, what is another major world religion that you know of that you think would have a lot of people?
I'm gonna guess it's not Pastafarianism.
No, it's not Pastafarianism. It's not even Rastafarianism or
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastri. I can't even say that one.
Zoroastrianism.
Yeah,
The
Zorro.
alien.
The people who believe in Zorro. Zorro was what a hero to the
I believe in
Mexicans.
aliens.
Anyway, no, I'm surprised y'all didn't get this one. I mean, it's
Buddhism.
Buddhism, yeah.
Buddhism.
Buddha is a
Yes.
big deal. I mean,
See, it took me a little bit because a lot of people don't consider that a religion; they consider it a lifestyle.
well, I mean, but what is a religion other than something that informs the way you live your life and your
Yeah.
philosophy
It's the same
Yeah.
with
of life?
same with
The same with atheism.
oh,
or
what's the
whatever.
Japanese one? What's it called?
Taoism.
Maybe?
Well,
I thought it started with an S.
Shinto.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
Shinto's
all about,
on this
like-
list as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Family.
yeah.
Dead family members. What's
Yeah,
that
yeah,
called?
Yeah.
Ancestral.
Ancestral.
Yeah.
things.
I thought that was Chinese.
Well, the Chinese have
Yeah.
a traditional religion that involves
Right.
that as well, which is much bigger than the Japanese one. That one actually is next on the
But
list.
that one's more of a religion, and the Japanese one is more of just do it to respect. Than
Yeah.
Like more
Cultural
of a way of
thing.
Cultural thing.
Yeah, kind of like we have our traditions of
Right.
different events,
Yeah.
remembering things. But yeah, the Chinese traditional religion is 394 million people. So
Still a lot.
yeah, it's a large portion. But I mean, honestly, Christianity and Islam is nearly half the world.
Yeah.
It's like 43% of the world is just those two. And again, of course, there's a lot of division within those two.
So,
So they're not like
what
unified.
percent of the world believes in a god? Monotheism.
That's difficult because Hindus make up
Yeah,
quite a large
Hindu's
percentage.
a big chunk, and they obviously have multiple gods. The atheists are a fairly big chunk, and they believe in no gods.
Mhm.
So that right there is about 30% that don't believe, that either believe in multiple or none. Then you've got like neo-paganism and some other things that are going to have some multiple gods, spiritism and some things. Some of the African traditional religions are going to have multiple gods. But most of those are pretty small groups. So maybe 30. So looks like probably somewhere around 60 to 65% are monotheistic, which is, and that's basically your Christianity and your Islam. Plus, I mean, I'm not sure really where exactly Buddhism falls in there because, again, it's
Yeah.
do they even really believe in a god, or do they?
I would say
so. There's some tricky things there to nail down.
I don't know.
But how
Yeah.
much of the world believes in some supernatural presence beyond
Most.
themselves is pretty much everything
Pretty
except
much
for the atheists, obviously, which is 14%. So
Because even just
86%
the ancestral worship,
Right,
with
they're
any
still
gods,
believing-
it's still
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
still going to believe that those.
That the
beings,
spirits give them
yeah,
power
those-
and stuff.
Yeah. So really, you're looking at 86% of the population believes in some sort of supernatural beings, whether it's spirits or of former humans, or whether it's gods of multiple gods, or whether it's one god. Yeah, interesting stuff. So next time, though, we'll dig into the other two categories of arguments and maybe start to dig in a little bit more on some of the religions, because obviously some we're going to be more familiar with than others. And we're not, I mean, like I said, we've got some on here that, it's like 500,000 people in the whole, out of 7 billion.
Yeah.
We're not going to spend a lot of time on those. But the major world religions especially, we want to talk about those.
How much is Zoroastrianism?
Zoroastrianism is actually 2.6 million.
That one was actually growing.
And it may be. I don't have on here, whether they're growing or shrinking or what, or over the last 10 years or whatever. But
What do they actually believe in, though?
It's complicated.
yeah, well, all religions are complicated, and that's why we're going to spend a little more time actually talking about. We want to be fair to them about what they actually
Right.
believe.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to just, they believe in this. I mean, other than the Pastafarians, who
Pastafarians.
do believe in the flying spaghetti monster, which I mean
I'm sorry. There's no way to take that seriously.
it is difficult.
It
What's
is.
interesting? Another thing I don't see on here. I see the neo-paganism, but I don't see Satanism on here.
Satanism.
I kind of have to wonder where.
What about Wiccan?
It would be.
Yeah, see, Wiccan is not on
Wiccan-
here.
Wiccan is
No, because they a lot of times believe in God. They
It'd be
just
very
worship Satan
strange.
instead.
It would be very hard to place. They
Yeah,
do
very
believe
It would
broad.
just be in that
it is.
role.
It's very broad. You can be,
Yeah.
you can have another religion and still be Wiccan.
Yeah, and that's the way some of these are.
Masons.
Kind of like Masons, except for a lot of Wiccan beliefs do, like there is a sun god and a moon god.
Well, but Wiccans may fall into some of the neo-paganism.
Right, it would fall.
Um, They might fall into like the Unitarian Universalism, the Spiritism. There's a lot of categories where somebody might be Wiccan and might also fall into one of these other.
And there's a
categories.
lot of Wiccan is
Yeah.
very broad. There's a lot of different.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is, as we go through these different religions, we are not going to be able to nail down
Exactly.
specifics. So we're going to have to. I know people are like, well, don't. That's a. You're just painting with too broad of a brush, and that's not how all of that group. Yeah, I understand that, but the fact of the matter is, we have to use the broad strokes. Or because we can't get down. I mean, again, like with the Christian religion, these are people who believe in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But even amongst people who call themselves Christian, there is a vast different from people who do not believe there's a hell to people who do not believe Jesus was born of a virgin, to people who do not believe that Jesus is a separate person from the Father. There's
To the people who believe that Mary was born of a virgin.
not
Born sinless.
that she was born
Yeah.
sinless. Yeah, you've got that. I mean, to people who believe you can or should pray to Mary, to people who believe you should not, to people. I mean, it's such a broad category of people with so many different beliefs. I mean, I have a book just of different denominations in the United States. It's a book this thick, and there's hundreds of different denominational groups in that book, and each one it's only like a paragraph about them. So I mean, the
Even
book's that thick.
When we were talking about what percentage of the world is monotheistic, even under Christianity, there are still some that would consider themselves Christian but are not monotheistic.
Yeah, and there are some of the other religions that believe in one God who do not consider Christians to be monotheistic.
Right.
I mean, the Islam is very clear that having Jesus be God's son is having another God, and is basically equal to idolatry. So, that's
Iglesia de Cristo, not just Church of Christ, but specifically that. It's like I don't remember what country it originates in, but they believe like you can't do that because if you did do that, you'd have to have the 7 Holy Spirits and
yeah.
like you'd end up with like 10 gods.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The 7 spirits of God and the
Right.
Father and the Son and and it is a challenge, and at some point along the way we'll get to that challenge. Right now we're still trying to figure out some more basic things than that. We've really gone a long time. I cannot see the numbers on that clock from here as it counts. I don't read it. We don't want to know. But
Yeah, you don't.
It's 6 hours and 45 minutes.
We're gonna have some editing to do.
Nah, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.